This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
Hey guys, sorry we're late, but we made it.
Yes, we did. So it's been kind of a topic that's been touched on a lot lately that we're going to cover today. And especially in the Magic sphere, recent issues with certain people being let go and stuff that they were struggling with. We're going to tackle mental health and what it means to MTG Finance, specifically on the vendor side. What it looks like for us, how we deal with working for, weeks on end, and what inevitably can happen from that.
Yep.
So that's basically, it's something that, we both agree just hasn't really been talked about a lot because there's a wear and tear on it.
Yeah. People over the last couple of weeks talked about the grind of Star City circuits, the pro circuit, and what it meant at the beginning, the middle, and where we are currently historically. And not a lot of people have the same kind of knowledge that a handful of us vendors do within this space to actually talk about what it's like to serve those people as well. People go out to these events, they need cards to play, and it's not everybody can handle it like Star City and Channel, where you make an order and it's sent with the crew to the site. We've got to drive, we've got to fly to these events and serve our customers there. And this is just kind of a behind the scenes aspect to all of these events. Without players, there would be no events, but without vendors, a lot of players wouldn't be able to play in those events. I would venture a guess and say somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 60 people walk into a Magic Fest and don't have a complete deck until they're on site after talking to vendors.
At least. I mean, it's, I can't tell you how many times this past weekend at Columbus it was, do you have any Okos for the events that they were going to play on? Or, in one case, it was for Modern. He didn't have it for the main event because he just planned on picking it up there.
Yeah.
And, it's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is like, yeah, when we're at the booth, we're happy, we're go lucky. But, depending on the vendor, you may be working a 13, 14-hour day.
Yes.
And then come Monday, you're back at your 9 to 5.
Or you're in transit again, which is not a restful situation either.
No. And especially, a couple weeks ago, actually back in September, I myself ended up in an outpatient psychiatric facility because I had worked 9 weekends straight of shows.
Yeah.
And this wore on me to the point where I couldn't do it. And, it's the harsh reality that and I don't want to make it seem like vendors have it harder than anyone else. It's just something that's not discussed is the wear and tear that, people deal with on the vendor side that, we get exhausted too.
Yes.
We burn the candle at both ends just as much as a grinder. It's just a different kind of grind for us than it is.
And sometimes it's a lot more apparent for us. You'll get to day 2 or day 3 of an event, which is in a lot of cases is already day 3 or day 4 for a vendor. And you'll have that guy that's just sitting there staring off into the distance and you're trying to get his attention and he's just looking right past you. He's basically asleep with his eyes open at that point. Or the vendor that's just, shoveling some kind of energy bar into their face because it's the only time they get to eat is when everybody's walked away from the booth and you just catch them like a squirrel, just like going at it. Like, these are things that we catch flack for as vendors that people don't understand comes part and parcel of this job. And there's more to it than just being at the booth and having to eat, because that's the time we get. We're there to serve. And these are the only times we get. So it's a lot more public in that sense than somebody in the service industry, a waiter, a waitress, or a busser, where they can remove themselves for a little bit. We're there. We don't have that ability.
This area that they can go to and just chill. And we don't. We're out there with everything, and not to mention, you miss your wife, you miss your kids, and it's not always as easy as just like, well, they're obviously more important. Like, yeah, they're obviously more important, but so's, the job.
Yes.
So there are moments where it wears on you because, like, one of my coworkers at one of the companies I work for, he will regularly get FaceTime, like in the middle of the day, just with his wife and kid. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things because he's just like, I just want to be home because, it's hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it is, you are kind of forced to do things to succeed in the player side and the vendor side, as far as like the lack of sleep goes, the lack of self-care. And it's just something that, I held that event to benefit NAMI, and there's going to be another event coming up soon, because I think it's important that as an industry, we all strive to take better self-care, of ourselves, and try to obviously help others take care of themselves as well. Just by even being mindful, or being like, yo man, like you need to sit down, go sit down, like take your 30 minutes, whatever we'll cover, you'll hit me back later on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's one of the big things that I think is missed very often. And like you said, day 3 of the GP, maybe day 4 or 5.
Yeah.
For a vendor, because we start prep for a GP the Friday prior to the GP.
Yeah, getting your orders together from the site, whatever you're pulling, right?
Yeah. And then like going through our inventory and pulling singles to bring. And you still have all your daily workload to go with it. So, I make the joke of living the dream whenever someone asks how I'm doing, because you think it was a great movie. But, it's wearing on you. And I think I at least try to be mindful of it when dealing with customers, that like, I don't know what they're going through. And, everybody, like you said, gets that 1,000-yard stare.
At some point. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say we're under, over, or just appreciated as vendors. This is like we keep saying, this is just something that people don't really get a handle on, and that Magic Fest as a whole are stressors for everybody. Even as a judge just doing paper, I was there hours before the players, and the only thing that made up for that was I got to leave after the last round of my GP was done, because there was no more paper to hang.
Yeah, I also would like to go on record as saying that, frankly, I think judges have it worse than anyone, because they're effectively volunteers for the weekend.
Yeah.
On how much they're compensated. Granted, that may, change based on what the future holds. Who knows?
Yeah.
But as of right now, like, they're on a volunteer system.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important just to understand that everybody at the GP or Magic Fest, whatever, is in the same boat. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're at that event to be involved in Magic, you're all under the same stressors, or similar but different stressors. It's mentally taxing on players to play day 1 and day 2 of an event, and yeah, you're going to get short with people at the end, or you'll just be mentally and physically exhausted. And the same thing goes for vendors. It's a lot of interaction with a lot of different people about a lot of different things. Math all the time, even though it's simple and repetitious, it just wears on you. And at the end, you're in the same place that the players are. And the judge staff has similar stressors. It's just constant interaction. And I don't think all 3 of these groups appreciate each other enough, and how it impacts an overall Magic Fest.
Yeah. I think one of the most telling things is literally the best experience or interaction I ever had with someone shopping at a booth was them literally saying, like, hey man, you're doing a good job. Like, I was just there with the stare going, and he was like, dude, you're doing all right. And it was one of those like mind-blowing moments of like, hey, thanks. That, like, unironically, legitimately, that means a lot.
Yeah.
Like, even if you were just being sarcastic, and even, I think another important thing is just not just saying, hey, you're doing a great job, but being able to say, look, I need a break.
Yeah.
I need something, even if it's go up to a judge and say, hey, I just need someone to talk to, go to a vendor, go to a player, whatever.
Yeah.
Because you know when, like, you'll need that. And it's good to be able to take that moment to say, you know what, this is how it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a break.
I think that's important to note. Like, I'm not the kind of person that just wanders off from the booth, but I definitely take advantage of the time it takes me to go from my booth to the bathroom and back, and I will weave around as necessary to talk to people to keep myself mentally fresh and remove myself from the repetition that is, for the most part, greeting everybody that walks up to the booth, knowing that nobody's going to purchase anything, and then move on to the next, go down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times we walked by each other's booth at Vegas, but it was a lot because that's just what you do. And that's why,
you could walk the entire length of the room or like 1/3 of the room, and walking the entire length of the room was just a much better option.
Yeah, significantly.
Yeah.
And it's, I see players, like you said, being appreciative of like what other people are going through. I've seen tons of players with that stare. By the end of the weekend, they're just like gone.
Oh yeah.
No idea where they are or whatever. And I think that, it is important to be able to take that, what? My round's over early. I'm just going to sit here for a second.
Yeah.
I don't have to find my friends immediately. I can just pause and be.
Yeah.
And I think that's, especially in our industry, I don't think that positive mental health care, on any of the three sides, judge, player, vendor, whatever, is given as much attention as it deserves, which is kind of, why we decided to cover this, because especially on the vendor side, not that, I mean, I don't know how many vendors listen to this, but more vendors should take proper care of themselves for sure.
100%. Like, I think I mentioned before that I always would rather do an anime show or a convention of some sort than a Magic Fest, and it is 100% because I get to take better care of myself at those events. Generally speaking, at a Magic Fest, I need to be up about 2 hours earlier before the players need to be in the room, and Friday is the only day where I get to not be in the room by like 8 a.m. I think it's 9 on Friday because the hall opens an hour later. So that means we're winding down at the Magic Fest somewhere around 7 to 9 p.m. depending on what type of event it is, because if it's something like sealed in a slow format, then we're there later, or if it's modern, etc., we're going to be there later. You take an hour or two to go to eat dinner and then come back from. You're not looking at more than another 6 or 7 hours worth of sleep, if you're lucky, on top of the mentally taxing days that you have. But at an anime convention, those generally start, or any other type of shows like that, around 10, and you're done by 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Like, I've gotten in, 3 to 4 games of EDH after dinner sometimes, and it's still not even 11 p.m. And those shows are beautiful because I just feel so much better mentally and physically at those compared to Magic Fest. It took me a really long time to get into the 13-hour days of like Innistrad era GPs where we always had, no matter what, you had the extra round, and for whatever reason you were there an hour earlier, either on Friday or on Saturday, because those were when judge conferences were at GPs.
Yeah.
So the timings were fucking weird.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like you said, you get a little bit more time. I remember Dragon Con, for example, guaranteed 6 o'clock you're done.
Yeah.
This past weekend at Columbus, I think Saturday I went out to dinner, actually with a viewer, listener of the cast, Zach. Thanks for, hanging out, and some other people. And one of the vendors was like, "Hey, I'll be there at 10 o'clock," or he said, "I'll leave hopefully around 9." Mm-hmm. At 10 o'clock, he sent me a message and said, "I'm just going to put a sleeping bag down because we still aren't packing up."
Wow.
And they'd been there since 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Like, doing that on Friday night to me has led me into some very bad weekends. Especially when it's Friday night. If it's Saturday night, that's doable because generally speaking, I'm packed up and or out by the time the top 8 starts for most Magic Fest, unless there's infinite side events going like there were in not Madison, in Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota.
Where they had the infinite side events all weekend.
Yeah.
I can do a long Saturday, like a 13-hour Saturday into a short day Sunday. That, like, now that I'm flying home on Monday because my job finally allows me to.
Yeah.
But when I had to fly out on Sunday, those weekends were terrible. Doing a long night on Saturday.
Yeah.
But a long night on Friday means you're going to have an even longer day on Saturday because there are so many people in the room on Friday for the last chance events that you can expect a huge room on Saturday, which means people will be there until well after the last round finishes and the judges are like brooming you out of the room.
Yeah. That actually happened at GPKC this year. The vendor I was with, we were kicked out by Mashi from Channel. And he literally turned the lights out in the hall and said, "You guys have to go."
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, that does happen, because legitimately there are times where there is business to be done. And I think that's the worst part. It's also the best because it can lead to good weekends. But you go in, you don't know, you may have a $30,000 buy come at 9:00 when you're planning to leave.
Oh yeah.
And if you're there till 11 doing the buy, you're not going to say no, because you can't. It's not like, working at Target where you're like, all right, well, we close at 10, no ifs, ands, or buts. They may close the hall, but if you're in the middle of the buy, they're going to follow, hey, pack the stuff up if you don't mind. Do you want to follow us to the hotel? We'll figure it all out there.
Yep.
There have been times where I have done, after time at a booth, a literal floor trade where we just go outside in the hallway and we're like, all right, well, let's get this buy finalized. Now we have time in this hallway on this floor. And it's just incredible to see, how that works, because you don't get to take the time because the job literally won't let you sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that links back to the fact that none of these three groups understands the stressors of the others well enough to accommodate.
Yeah.
And this isn't an issue for vendors that really leads to finance in one way or another. All your pricing is done ahead of time. You've pulled all your singles for the event. You're there buying. You have your buy lists. They're pretty much set in stone unless you're one of the handful of companies that live updates buy lists over the weekends. It doesn't really impact finance. It really impacts the human-to-human interaction, which can impact finance, because if you walk up to somebody, like I said, who's just got that 1,000-yard stare, or somebody who's just short with you from as a vendor, you're going to pass, and then that's bad for the both of you because you weren't able to sell your cards, they weren't able to buy them.
Yeah.
This is just an everybody needs to care for themselves kind of issue.
Yeah, and be mindful and respectful of others. And it's, I like to pride myself personally, and all of the companies I work for do as well, on like giving a positive guest experience and having good customer service. And I think part of that is like even, as a player, giving good customer service, as a judge, as a vendor, just try to be mindful of like, hey, I'm dealing with this, and these other people probably are too, and just trying to have a little bit of empathy for that, because you may be up till 3 a.m. trying to figure out your 14th and 15th sideboard card.
Yep.
And we may be up until, 3 or 4 a.m. pricing for the next day, because we heard that all of a sudden Mono Black Devotion was the hot deck after day one. So now we want to bump the prices up on everything. So,
that has happened on more than one occasion. Or you've just bought the deck off a number of people. They sold it to you because they were done with it on Friday or Saturday. They had a bad time, but you can flip it, so you have to price it that evening. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
More often than I want to admit.
Every show.
Yes.
where I'm somewhere that does on-site processing. Every single show.
Yep. Or like I said, you just know you can flip it, so you're going to make, you might make 85% on that card compared to what you sold it for on the website, but what you spent on it versus your margin, you're going to come out ahead. So it means you can buy more.
Cash in hand now versus going home processing cash later.
Exactly. It's an interesting life we lead, and I guess a lot of people wanted to kind of keep it quiet because you feel like a burden as a vendor, or people might not want to interact with you if you were to to be vocal about it. And regardless, again, of which group you're in, it's just a stigma. We're here for each other. We're at these events so that we all can have a good time, and these events can happen so everybody can enjoy themselves. And there's no shame in having to tap out at any point in time because you just can't take the stressors anymore because you're just exhausted.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. There is such a bad stigma about it.
Mm-hmm.
That, I consider myself fortunate because throughout my life I've been able to be fairly open about what's going on with my mental health. And I think that's, like you've said, there's this element of like, I want to hide it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to appear like that guy is a vendor or that guy is a player or, I forget who it was that basically ousted Jerry about the shadow, why that happened. And Jerry's response was beautiful. He was like, look, yeah, that's absolutely what happened. But like, it's not on you to air my dirty laundry, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't say this because, there is that stigma about, hey, I'm suffering. And I think that part of what we can do, like both as vendors, as judges, as players, is just try to be honest about that stuff and just like, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. I'm going to take a break.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few high-level pros that recently have been like, hey, I don't feel this anymore. It's not for me. I've got stress going on, whatever. I'm going to take a break. And I think it's important that people are honest about that with themselves and other people.
Absolutely. And I guess the last point that I want to make before we head into picks is that it's out of the three types of people we've been talking about, players, judges, and vendors, the lifestyle of each at a tournament is virtually the same, where you're always looking to find a hotel that is reasonably close at as cheap a price as you can get to help save money because you're piling a staff of anywhere from 3 to 6 into your booth. So that means you're going to need anywhere from 1 to 3 rooms, and you will have people up on the floor. You might wind up in a seedy neighborhood. You might have to Uber to the event hall every day. But at the end of the day, outside of your tournament duties, we're all living the same life. I know there are a lot of people that kind of aggrandize the vendor lifestyle, or they think they could ascribe to it by backpacking because it's some beautiful lifestyle, and it's not. At the end of one GP Toronto, we got another hotel room because we'd only picked one up to Saturday night because the pricing was different on site than it was online. We actually got our Sunday hotel cheaper, and I got 4 hours of sleep on the floor before I had to be on my plane. At Worcester one year, I was crashing on the floor with a different vendor because the hotel was booked by the time I got word that I was working the event, and the hotel staff actually made my bed on the floor. Like, they folded the sheets and like dressed down my little nest on the floor.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And this is stuff that everybody's been through, and everybody's had to deal with this, and everybody's tournament struggles, like mentally and physically, are the same. And as a community, it's up to us to treat each other like humans and like we all live under the same human conditions. We're all dealing with the same struggles here. Yeah,
agreed. And like you said, I think it's just important we just try to be mindful of that.
Yeah. But with that, I think we're good to move on to picks if you are, or I am.
Yes. Let's get it rolling.
All right. So this is actually picks from 2 weeks ago because we had to push off our previous episode. But you're getting some picks that could have been affected by the secret layer, hidden layer, whatever was announcement that thankfully weren't.
Yes.
My pick is Fae of Wishes / Granted. This is a card that I've actually had the ability to play in Standard and felt extremely strong even in an Oko-based environment out of an Izzet deck, or now Temur deck, which I believe the Temur Rec deck ran this. And it's an incredibly powerful card that is underappreciated and underrepresented, and as we're just shifting out of the Oko metagame. The price is fairly stable at about 75-ish cents, which I think is well underpriced for an extremely versatile card that allows you to just continue wishing for cards out of your sideboard. We haven't seen a Jeskai control list. We haven't seen a good blue-white control list. And the Fires decks are what people expect to see a lot of in the upcoming months as we move through Standard. And this is a card that allows you to just wish through your board to either find your win con or redundant pieces of what you're doing. With the Golgari Adventures deck coming up and Thrashing Brontodon and Assassin's Trophies in the main, this card allows you to dig through your sideboard for either redundant pieces because they have been removed, or additional win cons that are stickier than what green-black can deal with. And I also want to note that I'm talking specifically about the set non-foil version of this card. The showcase has held a fairly decent value this entire way through. It's a little much to get into. The set foil itself is about $2 and also fairly flat. And if this card picks up as a wish, I imagine that the actual price in this will be about $3, so you'll be able to get out and buy a list ahead. And the foil should be north of 5, maybe 8 at the top end if this doesn't kind of like take over. And this, as being an Eldraine, that gives it, is it a 12 or 18 month life cycle?
I think 12 left, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 12. Yeah, 12.
All right. So for 73 cents, 75 cents on TCG Player, this to me seems like a slam dunk. It's basically a bulk buy, both in quantity and price, and it's something that I expect to come up in the midterm. It's not going to be a long-term hold. It's going to be a midterm hold as we move through the actual Standard metagame and see real decks for once, now that we won't just have elks floating around.
Hallelujah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid pick. I've been gradually picking up the storybook versions myself.
Yep.
Foils are in a really weird spot right now for set foils because of being 1 in every 3 packs now. So, like you said, I think the foil multiplier is not particularly high on it, but I think it's a fine pickup either way at like 25 to 75 cents.
Yeah.
Especially as this stuff, like this type of effect becomes more common, eventually they're just going to have to allow it in EDH.
Yeah, like they keep printing with, like, there are house rules, or there were house rules for wishes. I was talking to somebody about this. I'm pretty sure the rule used to be you could use the wishes, but you had to have a sideboard set aside already, and it was like either 10 or 20 cards. I can't remember what.
Usually 10 is what it's been like here in St. Louis when people have had events.
Yeah.
And I think that eventually the rules committee will be forced to acknowledge, like, hey, yeah, this is a thing. Everybody gets one, and this is how it's going to work.
Yeah. I do want to make a point of order about the foils. Right now, Card Kingdom is not buying the actual foils. They're buying the showcase foil, of course, but the promo pack and the promotional version of the foil, meaning the pre-refoil, have basically pushed that card off of buy lists. So this is also something new, a brand new paradigm that we're seeing. Yeah. The promo pack's not so much. They've been around since, what was it, Core 20?
Yeah, so they've been around.
But we have the promo pack, we have the pre-release, and we have the showcase cards all in foil now, pushing down the 4th version, which is the set foil. There is a chance that card craters, the set foil, and if it does, then that's when I would scoop those.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is something that this is worth mentioning that we've seen with a couple of foils already, specifically in like the rare slots where the foil crater is awful. I mean, there was a while where Foil Oko was only $5 more than non-foil.
Yeah.
Buy list and retail. So if it affects something at that level of playability and power level, you better believe it's going to affect stuff at lower playability and power level.
Yes, yes.
I think that's worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to your pick?
Yep, my pick. I have chosen the one and only Brimaz.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I've picked this was because cats are always a popular tribe. And then I heard about the kitty pack, and I was like, well, obviously they're going to print Brimaz, because that's the only thing worth a damn. And then I realized I had faith in Wizards of the Coast to do anything right. So everything worked out.
They did put one general in there, but it's the commander general.
Yeah, and Miri.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I like this pick for a few reasons. One, it is an incredibly efficient, aggressive card that is still in Pioneer.
Yes.
It is 2 white devotion if that ever becomes relevant, which it may. We're also returning to Theros, and I expect some type of synergy with old Theros cards in new Theros, because they clearly, at the point they were designing this stuff, and clearly at the point that they were designing Modern Horizons, knew they were going to release this new format where this would be something that they would have to worry about.
Yes.
So I think it makes sense that this will be the type of card that, even if it's because of the kitty pack, because cats always spike when other cats come out.
Yep.
Even if it's because of Theros, particularly in the short term, I think about, $7 for this card is fine. It's also a card which has currently a 3x multiplier on foils.
Jeez.
Is pretty absurd for something like that. Now, the reason that's relevant is because if we do see a reprint of this card, I think it's most likely going to be in a commander set. And that means we won't get foils.
Yeah.
Because I can't believe that Theros is going to be chock full of reprints that aren't temples or like Banishing Light or something, So I think that short to mid-term, this is a really good pickup. It's also something that I feel like has very low visibility right now, because Abzan isn't a thing in Modern anymore. So there's no chance you're running into this card at FNM and being like, oh, I remember that card.
Yep.
And it's an easy pickup at about $6 out of trade binders, maybe even as low as $5. So I just think it's worth picking up for that, because we've got tribal hype coming up, we've got set hype coming up, and we've got a format with bans happening every week, and this is a safe card to not get banned. So.
Yeah. I like this because it went... I thought it came out of the sideboards of the heroic decks in Standard, and I was pretty sure I've seen it in Modern or Legacy at one point in a similar slot, just because it's a sticky threat, and as soon as you get to untap with it, it's just going to kind of balloon and make the game difficult for your opponent. But it seems like while people have been playing green-white aggro or green-white heroic in Pioneer, they're sticking even lower to the ground with the cards that trigger to make tokens with heroic. So it seems like it's just an archetype in its nascency. So once people get around to actually experimenting with the deck more, now that Pioneer's kind of settled in and we haven't had bans for 2 weeks and people can refocus, we might see this card begin to pop in that deck, or if blue-white heroic comes back around, if there's enough, or red-white, whatever you want to do with it. Even in an exert style deck, I think this works. The cat tokens are white, right? Yeah, white.
Yeah.
So that also works into like Conclave Tribunal, where you can start convoking a lot of your white spells that way, and it's a multi-avenue threat.
Yeah.
It's a solid card. It is also a decent mono white commander, though I don't think it has much representation.
Not currently, no. Mono white is still mostly in the realm of like Isamaru, the occasional Elish Norn.
Yeah,
stuff.
Under 2%.
Wow, that is low.
Well, 0.02 technically.
Yeah.
I like this card definitely as a pickup for your play sets. I don't know if this is something that I would target myself, just because I don't know what the timeline on it is. It seems a little difficult to suss out, but at worst, owning your playset is not going to be hurtful in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, if this is your play style, pick it up now, because if you wait until it pops, you're going to be paying twice as much.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and that's the way that's the way I view it. So it's interesting to hear that you're so much more on board with this than I am.
Yeah. I just think that, I again, like on Mythics, I usually, if they're like in the $5 to $6 range, I don't want to go more than like 10 deep just because liquidity or 12 for 3 sets. But yeah, I think this is a solid pickup for sure right now, because I think it's only like, and Pioneer especially, like you said, those lists are in their nascency. And once we start getting it fleshed out, we'll see strategies like this start to develop and explore their build boxes more.
Oh yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
when you see this card pop.
Yeah, I totally agree with. So that's awesome. But all right, guys, I think that's going to be it for this week. We'll get this pot up as soon as possible. There might be a video that goes along with it if I can throw up some stills. Once I get back from holiday, I'll see what I can do about that. Otherwise, it'll at least go up on YouTube, so you can listen to it there. We will be putting out a poll now that we know what's in Layer within our Discord to try and get an idea what everybody would be interested in regards to giveaways, and that should be there either towards the end of this week or beginning of next as we suss things out. But as always, you can catch us on iTunes, on Stitcher, and on YouTube. We are still open for our UMA giveaway, so as soon as we click over to 100 patrons, we're going to freeze it and raffle that off. But in the meantime, have a good week.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.